We're going to try to top that story today. Someone read, and so this is one of the scriptures that we like to quote a lot, is 2 Timothy 3:16. Right.
Don't snap it.
So what does 2 Timothy 3:16 say? Scripture is God breathed, and then what does it say after that? Useful for teaching, instruction, exhortation.
Sung like a true mother.
Yeah. Gotta sing the song and then I'll remember.
Correction and training for righteousness. All right. So I will say that part of my struggle with the next two chapters of Judges is what exactly is God trying to teach us in these two chapters? This story is incredibly dark. It's obvious that we're not going to have any problem realizing, oh gosh, there's a lot of sin going on here. I mean, it's going to be obvious. But what is it that we're trying to learn from these two chapters here? So let's go ahead and we'll start. Can someone read 19:1 through 4 for me?
Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there for 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the mother's father, prevailed on him to stay, so he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there.
Okay. All right. We'll do some of the details in just a second, but we've got man. He has concubine. There's a little bit to deal with there. We'll talk about where it says that she's unfaithful and she goes to her father-in-law's house, and then he goes after her. So continue on reading. So Collins, if you can continue on, read 5, 6, and then 9 and 10.
On the 4th day, they got up early and he prepared to leave, but the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward, the woman's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." On to 9.
Yeah, go on to 9.
Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the woman's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay, enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way home." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine.
Okay. All right. So let's digest the first part of the introduction to these characters. I did keep in Randy's tradition to have a map. So this man is from Ephraim. His concubine is from Bethlehem. So he has gone down to Bethlehem to his father-in-law's house to kind of recover her. And then he's going to come back up to, he talks about going to the house of God, which at this time was the tabernacle, which was in Shechem. So he's going to come back up this direction, which will be important in our story here in a little bit here. But right now he's in Bethlehem, heading back up. It says towards Jerusalem. get to Jerusalem in just a second, but that ends up playing a small role in our story here. The story, Hollis skipped the first part of that first verse, but the first verse, started off like a lot of these have started off lately. At that time there was no king in Israel. Okay, and you definitely get the impression in reading this in these last parts of the book of Judges that this is a bad thing, right? That these bad events that they're talking about is because there is no king in Israel. If there were a king, it was better. But one thing I think that's always interesting to think about that when we get to 1 Samuel, what does God say about a king when we get to 1 Samuel? They rejected him as king. That's certainly true, and basically, God in that rejection say, okay, you're going to have a king, but this is not going to solve the problems that you think it's going to solve, right? Okay. So I do think, in a sense, the core problem is exactly as Laura says. The problem is there's supposed to be a king in Israel. It was supposed to be God, and they're not treating God as king, and that is going to cause some big problems. Verse 2, which is translated, the NIV that I had up there, it's translated as that the woman was unfaithful to him. It's not always translated that way. Sometimes it's translated more of the woman some of your verses may say something like the woman was repugnant with him, or angry with him, which certainly has a much different connotation, right? That is whether or not, because right now you feel like the woman has certainly done something wrong, but if she was repugnant with him, it may be that was not necessarily the case.
It carry on for a long time too.
Right. Right.
And that's what God said.
Right. And that's and we're gonna obviously her story is gonna end up being very tragic by the end of it when we get to the end of her story. But we do find that so she does for whatever reason she leaves, she runs to her father-in-law's house. The husband does go after her. That actually seems good, right? I mean, I think that's that is a part of the story that does seem good. That he does seem to want to pursue her after she has left him. And so they get to the father-in-law's house. The father-in-law tries to keep him there. We're not told why. Not really told what exactly. I did find one commentator that did mention something about that the father-in-law maybe had never met him at this point because of the way the greeting was kind of stated at the very first part of, I think, verse 4. But for whatever reason, the father-in-law is begging him to stay, and the man is itching to get back home, get back to his homeland, and so eventually he is able to leave, but he leaves late in the day, so he can't get all the way back to Ephraim in a day. He's going to have to stop somewhere on route. Okay, all right. Any questions or any thoughts about that? So far we have none of the characters we've been introduced so far are necessarily great. Again, we do have this one thing of the man pursuing his wife, which we think that is at least something to hold on to here. But I think overall we've got a lot of flawed individuals here. So let's see what happens next. Can someone read verses 11 through 15 for me?
Okay, when they were near Jebus, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into any city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gilgal." And he added, "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah and Ramah and spend the night in one of those places. So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah. How do you say that? Gibeah?
Yeah.
In Benjamin. Then they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night.
Okay. And you read, go ahead and read through verse 20 there.
That evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, "Where are you going, and where did you come from?" He answered, "We are on our way from Bethlehem in Judah to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, where I live. I have been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I'm going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me in for the night. We both have straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants, me, the woman, and the young man with us. We don't need anything. You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need, only don't spend the night in the square."
Okay. I'm going to go back to the map here. All right. So these are Gibeah is this city right here that we're talking about. Jerusalem is right here. Jerusalem at this time, I think we've mentioned this once before, it is still under control of a Canaanite tribe called the Jebusites. It doesn't become Israelite city until the reign of David. So it is a Canaanite city. Benjamin is this yellow area. Okay, the tribe of Benjamin is the yellow area here. Okay, a smaller tribe that is happens to be halfway, right in the middle between Judah and Ephraim here. And so that is where they are. They're in the city of Gibeah when these events take place. So first takeaways here. So one of the things I think is mentioned is he says, let's definitely not stay in the city of the Jebusites. I wonder if he rethought that at the end of this story. Maybe the Jebusites would not have been a bad idea. But that's interesting that he does have that scruple. Now, obviously, one thing that's obviously very sad here is he comes in, he needs a place to stay with the Benjaminites, and none of the Benjaminites basically will take him in. So he was hoping that since he was an Israelite, going to a city that was a bunch of Israelites would have been beneficial, but it turned out not to be. None of them would take him in at all. The only one who took him in, what was the characteristic about him? He was also an Ephraimite. He just happened to be living there. He was also a tribe of Ephraim. So he was. It was. There was definitely a tribalism that it's probably hard for us to understand. That the individual tribes are considering more identity with them than they were with being part of the Israelites here. I also think it's interesting, what is the man who he's staying with last warning in this verse? What is his last warning? Don't stay in the square. So it's not, he is under no illusion that his town doesn't have some serious problems. He kind of realizes that there's the possibility for some bad things to happen here. Okay. Any other thoughts about that before we see the horrible thing that's going to happen here?
Not to be a spoiler, but it's like, given this guy's later behavior, it's kind of like, that's a little bit smarmy for him to say, well, we don't want to stay in this other town. There's no Israelites here, but
yes,
we're going to do this other thing.
The man seems to have very moments of righteousness that don't necessarily seem to mirror his entire life, do they? He has these weird little flags he stands on, and then but then has other very significant problems. Yes, I would agree with that. All right. Okay. All right. So this will be a harder read. Just the context. Who wants to read verses 22 through 22 through 26 to start off.
I was in it.
Okay, all right.
Somebody gonna do it. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring this out the man who came to your house so that we can have sex with him."
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, that's what that old man said. The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here's my virgin daughter and his concubine. I'll bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such a this outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn they let her go. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, read. If you could, read 27 through 30.
When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." He's a great guy. But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine, limb by limb, into 12 parts, and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something. So speak up." I said, "Honey, did you order something from Amazon? We haven't used it today."
Okay.
All
right.
You gotta do something here.
So, first of all, the wickedness of the men of Gibeah. Pretty horrific thing that they did. They were, they were going to take the man out. They were going to rape him. Obviously, completely violating lots of God's laws. Clearly was going to be an evil act what they wanted to do to start with. Then we have the owner of the house. So it's interesting, he feels that would be awful, which it should be, but he says as an alternative, let's do this other thing, which also would be pretty awful, right? Okay? That his own daughter, which Laura and I got in discussion about this. We don't exactly even know what happened to her. We don't know, she's not even mentioned again. And then the concubine of the man. And, why don't you rape her instead? And that's like, that seems pretty horrific as well, right? Okay.
How can a father do that?
Right.
Yeah.
That is certainly one
Disgusting.
takeaway that we have for this is how could he do this? We certainly get the impression, again, from the previous verse, he knows that his town is wicked. I do think the man, I don't know if the man was expecting exactly this, but you kind of almost get the impression he was expecting something. He was, and he is, become, I guess probably to the point that he is just dealing with, got to the point where he just deals with it. But it's certainly a horrific strategy for dealing with it. Yes?
Some similarities in this story to the story of Lot.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And Lot was in the same boat probably as this man, is that he had gotten so far away from the things that he was taught that he had just kind of carved out his own survival morality dish, if you will, if you understand what I'm kind of meaning by that he had just kind of decided, okay, this is how I need to be to just kind of get by in this area. and it's just and,
Lot offers his daughters too.
right. Yes. Yeah. And Lot did the same thing. Yeah. And so this ends up. So that is also awful. The Canaanites, the Canaanite religion, the Canaanite religion really would have caused. Let's say this right. I guess one thing I'm trying to say, this would have even been revolting for the Egyptians. Not as much for the Canaanites. This was more of their culture. But the Egyptians would have been shocked by this behavior, which means it kind of shows how far the Israelites have progressed, that the Canaanite religions have so that they don't even the false gods they were worshiping in Egypt are not even influencing them anymore. That it's just they have. One of the things we'll get to a little bit in the next chapter. These events are probably occurring. We know they are occurring during the lifetime of Aaron's grandson, because he's mentioned in the next chapter, which means it's not a real long time. Probably 70 years, 60 years since they conquered the land that these events are occurring. So it is trying to show a kind of a shock value of just how depraved certain elements of society have gotten to this. Obviously, we almost laugh at the man's reaction to going and telling the concubine, "Let's get up and go." We would want to say, you ought to say, "Well, I guess you had a rough night tonight. Thanks for being raped in my place." It is. I mean, the reaction is just shocking to us. That it's like, okay, we can just move on from this, and whatever happened to you last night happened. Now, obviously, when she realizes that she's dead, that she has been abused so bad that she is now dead, he has a little bit more reaction. What do you think is the reason for that reaction? Why do you think all of a sudden he didn't have outrage that the men were going to come up and rape her, or rape him, or rape her, or didn't have enough outrage that he could possibly do a right thing here, but then wants huge vengeance on her?
This whole passage is just filled with so many contradictions. This guy, number one, is a Levite.
Mm-hmm.
He knew the law, or should know the law, and
right.
spread it. And then you have the old man who's practicing Middle Eastern hospitality and lets it go to seed to the point that he offers his daughter. I mean, it's just such a nasty. You have the behavior of the men of the town, which is against God's law, and then now he's brutally oblivious to his concubine's fate, and now he wants vengeance for her, righteous vengeance. And it's kind of like it's just such nasty contradictions in this whole passage.
Yeah.
Well, he cared enough about her to begin with to go chase her to her parents' house.
Yeah.
He felt something.
He felt something.
And if it was a concubine, was a mistress,
right,
not a slave. So it's not like he was going to get his property.
Right.
It's not like he gave his property to protect himself. I don't think. Harvey, you know more about the culture than I do, but I'm thinking there was some emotion there that he wanted her to be back with him, and yet he was willing to say, "Take her, leave me alone." So very separate.
You kind of wonder if this is when he's wanting vengeance. If he is all of a sudden feeling righteous indignation for the law of the Lord, it's kind of like that's a little bit late, dude.
Yeah. And I think that happens to us a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That we, we get triggered, and it's, and we, that there is eventually sort of a wake up, even though we were ignoring it for many years, ignoring, we were ignoring it. All right.
Maybe naive to just how evil they were, because seeing that he didn't want to stop at the Jebusites, he knew they were bad. But I think he still thought, I don't excuse him. I can't even imagine send the wife out and what are you doing in the house? I don't know, you just go to bed and then you say wake up? mean, like, I don't get it, but I don't think he imagined what would have happened.
Right. Yeah. You certainly hope not. You certainly hope that this, in the end, shocked him at a level, just how bad this could be.
You know, Scott, you were talking about how the period of time, 60, 70 years, how it got so bad so quick. But as you were saying that, I was thinking about our own culture. And in 2011, we had a catastrophe, and it's like the whole world focused on God for 5 minutes. And it hasn't been that long, a hell lot shorter than 50 or 60 years. And look where we are now. So, once everything gets back to copacetic, life is good, people just go off on a tangent and do whatever they want to do and forget what got them there to begin with.
Certainly. You're absolutely correct. All right. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here, but I want to talk about this verse, because this verse actually may have been driving what happens next with the Israelites. So, someone read Deuteronomy 13, verses 12 through 15.
If you hear it said about one of the towns the Lord your God is giving you to live in, that troublemakers have arisen among you and have led the people of their town astray, saying, let us go and worship other gods you have not known, then you must inquire, probe, and investigate it thoroughly. And if it is true and it has been proved that this detestable thing has been done among you, you must certainly put to the sword all who live in that town. You must destroy it completely, both its people and its livestock.
Okay. So, this, it's obviously not worship of other gods what's happening here, but this does give a little bit of a playbook of how Israel maybe should respond to this situation. Okay, that you have men in this town that have certainly done this great evil, and it mentions that you work through it, you investigate it thoroughly, and you let the town. But then there is sort of this justification of the town, being held responsible. All right. Let me see how I've got this. We're running out of time, and I really want to get to one thing here. So I'll tell you what. I'm going to summarize what Judges 21 through 12 says, so we can move a little bit further. So if you look at Judges 21 through 12, what's going to happen is it talks about the reaction of the Israelites to the mailing of the pieces of the concubine to the 12 tribes. Which, one thing to kind of note, Benjamin would have gotten one too. Since it mailed, so Benjamin would have gotten, a piece. And everybody does, the Israelites get motivated. The Israelites say, okay, you're right, this is awful. This is awful. Okay? And they do talk to the Benjamites. It does mention that about 400,000 Israelites start gathering. That'll sort of be important. They start gathering in Mizpah. I'm going to show you where that is on the map in a second. And they do send messengers throughout Benjamin, basically saying, turn over the wicked people of Gibeah who did this. They say, they don't want to hold Benjamin at this point responsible. They want to hold the people of Gibeah that actually committed the heinous act responsible. But Benjamin apparently stands behind them. Okay, stands behind the men of Gibeah who did this. They stand behind their fellow tribesmen here. All right. So here's our map. Mizpah is actually over here in the area of Gad, across the Jordan River. It's kind of interesting, and that's where they gathered. They had about 40,000 there. Benjamin, we're going to find in the next verse. The next verse accumulates an army of about 25,000 to defend themselves. And so Gibeah, again, remember, is here. So they're going to come across the Jordan River and invade this area. The yellow is the tribe of Benjamin. They're going to raid that area. So, do you feel like they're following Deuteronomy 13? Do you think the Israelites are doing right at this point in the way they're trying to seek retribution?
Seems like it's extreme.
It does seem extreme. And it's going to get more extreme, unfortunately. Unfortunately, it's going to, if they did just say, okay, we're going to, Deuteronomy 13 would have basically said you have the right to go ransack Gibeah, I think. Because if they're not going to confess their sins, if they're going to hole up and say we can do what we want, I think you could make that case. We're going to see, we may not today, I may actually let Randy talk about that next week, but we're going to see that it's going to get worse than just Gibeah when it's all said and done. Why do you think Benjamin is so willing to stick behind these men that have done this? Why do you think they want that instead of just saying, okay, let's turn over these awful people, we're going to stand by our tribesmen?
Either tribal loyalty or they also don't say anything wrong with it.
Okay, so you certainly hope it's the former, right? You hope that it is, okay, we're going to stand behind them because they're our tribesmen, so thick or thin. We certainly do that with some of our family members, right? Some of our family members will do these horrible things, and they're our family, okay? That we do feel that sometimes, right?
Well, they heard the story differently, but surely they know these tribesmen enough. They know they do vile things.
Yes, I would think that they know there at least is some truth in what's going on here. That.
You think the body parts would be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think that the man didn't just cut up his wife to create this rumor, huh?
He dared to.
All right. Okay. Let's see what time is it. We're really out of time, but I want to do one thing. So we're going to do one part of this battle, and then I'm going to have some closing remarks, and I'll end there. So I'll read this real quick. From their towns they came together at Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. At once the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their towns, in addition to 700 able young men from those living in Gibeah. Among these soldiers there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each who could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all of them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. They said, who of us is the first to go up against the Benjamites? The Lord replied, Judah shall go first. The next morning the Israelites went up, pitched camp near Gibeah. The Israelites went out to fight the Benjaminites and took up battle positions against them at Gibeah. The Benjaminites came out against Gibeah and cut down 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged one another and again took up positions where they had stationed themselves the first day. They ask again. The Lord answers, go up against them again. And then the Benjamites again have success the next day. 18,000 are killed. I'll paraphrase a little bit at the end there. But so the start of this battle is not good. The Israelites, they have a 400 to 25 advantage. 400,000 men to 25,000 advantage. It does mention the Benjamites apparently have some very skilled elite forces in their group, but the bottom line is the Benjamites actually kind of win a couple of victories here, a couple of victories in the first wave of battle. I do have this thing. Okay, so I want to blow this on. I won't keep it too much longer, but I do want to say one thing, do a couple things. So they ask a third time. This is where you mentioned that Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, is ministering before the Ark of Covenant. And the Lord does respond, go tomorrow. I will give them into your hands tomorrow. So they fought 2 battles and lost. God does promise them on the third battle that they will win. They will. I won't read that tomorrow, but I did have that section. Okay, so why is the war going poorly? Why do you think You know, the Lord says to do this, or the Lord at least says once they approach Him after they've decided to do this, the Lord says, "Okay, go ahead." And they have two battles, and things go very poorly. Okay. What do you think? Why do you think that? I think that's tough, isn't it? I do have a theory. I'm going to show that in a second. Second thing is I almost kind of wish we knew, when it says the Lord answered and the Lord said, I almost wish we knew a little bit more about how God was relaying this information. Was there a prophet? Was God speaking directly to Eleazar? What was going on here? Or Phineas. Phineas, sorry. Yeah. But it doesn't. And we mentioned this probably means it was about 50 to 75 years because it is his grandson. Now here's one commentary see if you recognize this quote. Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet if God wills it, that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood is drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago. Still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Anybody have an idea who may have said that? And he is commenting on Judges 20 here, effectively.
I bet $3 bill would say Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln is that quote is from. Okay. That is in his inauguration address in 1865. He would make the statement that the reason why the Civil War was so bloody for the United States is that the entire nation had to pay for the sin of slavery. That was his sort of take on why. Of course, in a sense, he could have looked at this the same way. You had Union armies who were probably doing what was sort of right, and they were getting beat all the time, and they were having to have it, and so that was. I think it's interesting that is. And he definitely made the statement: the entire nation has to pay for this sin. So, is that what's going on in Judges 20? Is the entire decline of Israel that has occurred means that the entire nation of Israel has to pay for that decline?
They didn't obey God by driving out the people. I mean, that's what's causing all of this.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, they were not perfect. The rest of the tribes were not anywhere near perfect as what Benjamin was. So.
Yep, that's definitely true. All right, we kept you long enough. We'll stop there. Yes, go ahead.
I was just thinking about this. When you read all this, it looks like the tribe of Benjamin will just be wiped out. From this, it's interesting that really Judah and Benjamin are about the only tribes that are left at the time of Jesus, and all the other tribes are out.
Yes, it is kind of interesting that Benjamin ends up being one of the surviving, like you said, one of the surviving tribes, and of course, I think it is fascinating that they end up choosing the first king from that tribe.
Right.
I think that's, and of course, we'll talk a little bit. Of course, next week, I assume Randy will go over how Benjamin gets completely destroyed. Not just the 25,000 men that come to fight, but they go and burn the entire tribe down, basically, burn the entire area to waste. And then the final chapter of the book of Judges talks about sort of their remorse that they've eliminated one of their own tribes, and how they can try to respond to that. And then again, I think it is somewhat fascinating that Saul ends up being from the tribe of Benjamin when they do end up having that. But anyway, thanks for this. This is a hard. I was really stressed on exactly what to go over on this particular chapter.
Was that the reason?